Today, I wanted to make a fun little video talking about the Z Fold 5 and that all too notorious cover display. You see, in the tech community, I notice a constant debate over the front screen situation. Some people think it's too tall and thin, while others really like it just the way it is. I find myself still undecided on which version is best for me, but to make it easier for you to decide, I'm going to compare the Z Fold 5 and the Pixel Fold's front screens in depth, while also showing you the pros and cons of each in a wide variety of situations, so that hopefully at the end, you can make a decision for yourself on which one is better for you. Before we start, let's take a moment to remember why we have that front screen in the first place. For many users out there, it serves as a quick, easy way to access your phone and accomplish quick tasks without having to formally open that inside display. With that in mind, the Z Fold 5 cover display accomplishes that goal just fine, whereas the Pixel Fold iteration excels at it. For the Z Fold 5, I use the front screen maybe 50% of the time, while the Pixel Fold, I use the front screen around 80% of the time. Say what you will, the way I see it, both devices arguably nail the front screen execution, but the devil is in the details, and to know what you're missing out on, we need to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each, starting with the often disputed keyboard experience first. When it comes to the typing experience, I do find it to be a mixed bag. Talking about the Z Fold 5 real quick, one-handed use is great. I like being able to access the entire keyboard easily without any kind of overextending of my hands. I do get typos here and there because of how cramped the default keyboard settings are, but generally I'm happy with the feeling. Not to mention, if you use swipe gestures to type, you should feel even more comfortable here considering how easy it is to reach all the keys with one hand. Two-handed typing is a nightmare though. I find myself getting typos constantly as the keys are too close together, my thumbs are just too big to be precise as I want it to be, and overall I really need to concentrate hard to make sure that I'm not making any mistakes. There is a workaround for this in the settings where you can change the keyboard size to something more spaced out. Without a doubt, this has helped me a lot in making sure it was a comfortable typing experience. To be clear, it did not solve all my problems, and it may not be as aesthetically pleasing as the default layout, but overall, that keyboard size setting saved me a lot of frustration. You can install Gboard as well, which does have some size preferences too. I actually prefer it, but not for the size options, but because Google's autocorrect is a lot better than Samsung's in my opinion. Compared to the Pixel Fold's full-size traditional keyboard, there's really no settings or changes you have to make, as this works well right out of the box. Like I said, this is a traditional keyboard layout through and through, so there's no learning curve and it feels as comfortable as any other smartphone these days. I will say though, the phone is wide, heavy, and expensive, so typing one-handed gives me a little bit of anxiety about dropping it. With a little overextending, you can reach the entire screen, but obviously it's a big risk if you drop a phone like this, so just keep that in mind. Gaming on these cover screens is very surprising as well. The way I see it, it would be more impactful to share with you what makes the Z Fold different, since the Pixel Fold is more of a typical phone experience. For the benefits of the Z Fold, you should notice games like Call of Duty or PUBG Mobile have a cropped in, more wide angle view. Because of that, player controls are nicely tucked in to the far left and right hand side to make for a clear view of the center screen. Not to mention, because of the wider surface area and landscape, you can commit to longer swipes and turns without hitting the borders of the display as easily. Another strength is in vertical gaming. Because of the thinner aspect ratio, it makes it easier for one-handed use, so you can expect a good experience in Pokemon Go or Doodle Jump if anyone still plays that. One downside I did discover was how some games like Dead Cells open up with these unsightly black bars, assumingly because of that aspect ratio. And while rare, this was certainly a big disadvantage of using a taller, narrow display like this. Overall, I'd say these are the biggest differences that you can expect between the two cover displays. We can touch on the Pixel experience for a little bit. Ultimately, like I said earlier, the experience is pretty much the same as a normal smartphone, although you can keep in mind this phone is thick and heavy while folded, so it might not be as comfortable to game on sometimes. Moving on, we can talk about general media consumption. I would say overall, the Z Fold cover screen is fine, with a few key differences to pay attention to. For starters, most apps will take advantage of that extra vertical real estate by reformatting content to use more of the screen. So in Twitter, you can see an extra tweet or two, YouTube will squeeze in an extra video suggestion if possible, and Reddit will show you a tad bit more info as well. For longer blocks of text like Reddit threads, Twitter threads, or YouTube comments, I actually prefer the taller, more narrow screen because of how natural it feels. Overall, the social media aspect is completely fine on the Z Fold front display. The only situations that I feel the experience was compromised was regarding the landscape orientation for obvious reasons. Primarily, videos and landscape take the biggest hit, and this is probably the only objective objective benefit the Pixel Fold has over the Z Fold in this regard. Otherwise, both should be fine for most people. By default, you get maybe a 4.5-inch screen size diagonally in YouTube, which is fine to me, just not ideal since I'm used to a much larger display. So if you're watching from a few feet away, it might be difficult to see everything that's going on. You can fix this to a certain degree by viewing in full screen mode. This mode does make the viewing experience a lot better since you can clearly see more of what's going on and it removes those black bars. Unfortunately, the top and bottom portions of content will still get cut off. Finally, I wanted to end this video going over the pros and cons of each real quick for those that need it. We'll start with the pros of the Z Fold 5. First, I'd have to say one-handed typing is just convenient and easy to handle on this device. To take it a step further, I actually find the cover screen to be more comfortable, especially for those with smaller hands or those that don't want a huge smartphone all the time. The Z Fold 5 in general is really small while folded and makes it super easy to fit into a pocket. I'd also say vertical content or timeline-oriented apps are a positive experience as well, as it's basically made for screens like this. For the cons of the Z Fold screen, I'd have to say the keyboard can feel cramped at times, even if you adjust the size. YouTube in vertical is less than ideal considering you get a tiny picture to actually see the content. I will say, switching to landscape does help, but not by much compared to the Pixel Fold. Speaking on the pros of the Pixel Fold cover screen, a big one is how close the front screen is to an everyday smartphone, which makes for a seamless transition. It's nice not to have any compromises for that cover display, and it helps a lot if you're in a situation where it doesn't make sense to use it unfolded, but still want to have a normal phone experience. Lastly, tent mode is noticeably much better on the Pixel Fold. Not only does the Pixel Fold have a slightly wider variety of angles, that uncompromised screen is a joy to use and is big enough to get a good view of your content. Transitioning to the cons, I truly can't think of anything major for the Pixel Fold's front screen. If anything, I would say the weight and thickness does make this a two-handed device. Yes, you can certainly use it one-handed, but with how heavy and expensive it is, I personally don't want to take the risk of accidentally dropping this device, so it's two-handed use for me. As for the final verdict, I think the Z Fold 5 cover screen is very usable, but you do have to temper your expectations a bit. There is a learning curve to the operation of a thinner display, as some apps don't handle the layout perfectly from time to time, and yes, it can feel a little cramped occasionally. That said, the Z Fold 5 cover display is definitely not unusable by any means, and to my surprise, the experience was nowhere near as bad as some people were making it out to be. If you want to see a more detailed comparison of both of these devices, don't forget to subscribe for when that video does come up in the future, but guys, that's everything I had to share on the Z Fold versus the Pixel Fold cover screens. If you have any questions, leave some comments below and either myself or the community will get to them. This has been Jordan Floyd from 9to5 Google. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.